You're listening to Growing Hope Conversations, the podcast from Growing Hope, a charity offering free therapy for children and young people with additional needs and support for their families. Join our host Bambi French as she welcomes guests who've been there, sharing real stories, honest struggles, and how churches can truly make a difference.
Carrie, welcome to the Growing Hope podcast. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. Thank you for asking me to do this.
Oh, it's really great to have you. And I'm sure that, what you're going to bring today will really bless and inspire a lot of people. So thank you.
Well, let's hope.
Yeah, I hope so. Before we get started, do you want to just tell everyone listening who you are, what you do, what you're about?
Gosh, I'm quite elderly now, so that's quite a big ask. So what do I do? That's such a good question. I know who I am. I'm not sure what I do. I do so many different things. I have so many roles and I have so many titles now. I have lots of letters after my name and before my name. And so I'm an ordained minister with my own church. I'm a Baptist minister. So that's the spiritual side of things in terms of what I'm doing. I'm also a campaigner and a supporter of families with children with special educational needs and disability. And then in my day job, I'm a presenter and a vocal coach and a leadership coach.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you're busy.
Yeah, always busy. Love being busy.
Yeah, and that's
like busy.
Yeah, and that is like your professional life as well, but your family too. You're busy with.
Oh my gosh, that never ends. It's 24 hours, 7. That's being a full-time carer as well as all of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Well, do you want to kind of tell us about your journey, how your journey began with special educational needs? Where did all of that start?
So I think, like most parents, you have this idea of how many children you're going to have and how you're going to raise them. And of course, life works out very differently to what you imagine. And so it was with us. We have 4 children, 3 birth, 1 adopted. But we had our first child and then we didn't have another child for 7 years because we were just getting our heads around what would it be like just to parent? That took us a while to work out. But very quickly, when we had certainly our second and then third child, we entered this whole world of acronym where you go to the school and someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, Mrs. Grant, we need to talk about the Ed Psych because you may need to think about getting an SEND assessment and it may be that your child has ADHD or ASD and we might have to send you to CAMS, but we suggest you go to the GP." And you just think, my goodness, what are they talking about? All these foreign words that don't mean anything to me. But very quickly you learn the language. And I think that's one of the first things that in a way is a barrier to the outside world, people that don't experience SEND, is that we speak in this funny language that we all now understand. And so I very quickly had to learn all of that. And with my first child, it's so interesting because 60% of Black and mixed race children are sent down an SEMH, social emotional mental health pathway, and not an SEND, special educational needs and disability pathway. And so it was with our first child. It was always, this child's being disruptive, this child is messing up the class by talking too much or fiddling around, doing stuff when they should be sitting still. And it wasn't until they were much, much older, in fact, they were an adult before they were given a diagnosis of ADHD and then ASD a bit later on. And so I think that already sort of set us on the back foot of not really understanding how these systems work. And when you are with your child and they're really compliant and, this Olive was just so such a good child and very, very kind of did what they were told, like I said, compliant. And so this didn't really match. What was happening at school didn't really match with what was happening at home. And it wasn't until much later when we realized, okay, this is ADHD, that through that lens, suddenly it began to make sense. But of course, you have to bear in mind that if you've been told since you were 5 or 6 years old that you're naughty and that you're disruptive and that you're causing a problem, then your self-image and your sense of self in the world and your place in the world is impacted. So by the time you're 18, you'll suddenly get told, well, that's it, you have ADHD. Then it begins to make sense. But then you've got to go back and repair all the lost years. And I think that happens with so many families like ours, is that it's about repairing those lost years. It's about reclaiming what's been lost because people just didn't get it, or people didn't want to get it, which is even more sad. You have to face that. And the one thing that you don't want is your children going to school and being traumatized. And then I look at my 4 children and they're all traumatized by school. And that really saddens me. And no child should be traumatized by school. Children should be flourishing in school.
Mm-hmm. There's so many people listening and who aren't listening and need to listen who would relate so much to what you're saying. And you're kind of fighting on all fronts from very early on. You're fighting to try and understand what people are saying to you in terms of like you say, all those acronyms and letters and what does all this mean. You've got then a race and ethnicity issues sometimes, where people are sent down a different the wrong route because it's just assumed that they're naughty children. We've also then, and I think with what Growing Hope works towards is building that growing that hope in Jesus. We've also then got that faith element as well. And
faith element is the most interesting, well, not the most, but it's one of the most interesting things. David and I, for the last 13 years, have run a parent support group in our home. And we have just about every faith within that group. But one thing that is seen in all the kind of sacred spaces, whether that's a church, a mosque, synagogue, etc., is that those families are judged in those spaces. So it's the antithesis of Jesus. Jesus goes to the margins and says, hey, I value you. I'm going to come and hang with you. I'm going to set up home with you guys. You're my people. And what the church often does, not always, but often does, is says, you guys, we don't really get you. We'll provide a quiet room at the back and we've kind of done our bit then. Whereas the idea, certainly for me, in the church that I have, that I'm the ordained minister of, is that we prefer the marginalised. They're given preference. They're upfront. They're central. And as you rightly mentioned there, this is not just about special educational needs, because, of course, we know that most people are not just one thing. They're intersectional. And so they may have race going on. They may have a physical disability going on. They may have gender. They may have sexuality. They may have all kinds of speaking English as a second language. And so all of these things stand as barriers to people accessing society, accessing communities, accessing that sense of belonging. And sadly, I hear all too often the same happens in the church.
We have there's a lot of people who we speak to who feel that the one place where they should be, can go or should be able to go to receive that support, that's not happening. Why do you think that is? Because I often think, is it intentional? Is it an intentional kind of act by the people of the church to just say to that mother or to that family, your children are too disruptive to be here, or they, is it intentional, or is it a lack of understanding and knowledge?
I think it goes deeper than those conversations that are about the disruptive child or the child that needs to wear ear defenders in a service or whatever. I think or can't sit still and needs to walk around a bit at the back. I think it goes to the very heart of what we see as normal. So, and this is the ideology of normal, if you like, is absolutely a part of empire and is part of colonization. And so what we teach people is actually normal is great. Normal is the gold standard. So that's what we're all trying to be. We're all trying to be normal. And then a church will define what normal is according to how they see the Bible. And each church might have a slightly different view of that. And this is what we hold up as gold standard. So what that creates is a system by which people are just trying to get as close to passing as they can. So if they've got something that goes against them, then they'll try to do something else that makes something go for them so that they can get that place in that elite group at the center. And so those hierarchical structures don't help our send community at all. And my whole work, I suppose, in terms of faith for the last 15 years, having a church in my home, is to deconstruct that, is to actually favour those marginalised, to say, I'm setting up home here in this space where people would normally be rejected. And that has proven to be one of the most extraordinary things that I've ever done in my life. That favouring of people that are marginalised really brings something very special and brings a kind of spiritual dynamic that I think was missing in my life before that. So I think also that churches are often set up in a client-provider way. So the needy, it's a bit like that scripture that the poor will always be among us. It's like we need the needy and we need some people to be needy. So in a way, we're not really setting people up for success, because what we do is we say, this is success, this thing that you'll never achieve, that's success. And then you're the needy people and we're the people that have got this thing. And so it speaks into hierarchy rather than saying, you're magical. What are you doing up the back there? When I was preaching, what were you doing? It looked like you were dancing. What are you up to? I'd love to know. What is it like to be nonverbal with God? How do you pray? Or be curious, to be interested, to be involved, to try out stuff, to say, actually, I mean, this is something we've done in our church, is what does it mean to be nonverbal with God? And how do we practice that? That's an actual practice, to pray nonverbally. And it brings out all kinds of incredible magic, incredible stuff with God. And so, but I think those things are not even explored because people are too scared, they're too boxed in. We can't get out the box. And what we've done as Christians is we've put scripture in there and said, all these scriptures back up our little box that we've got here so no one can get out. And that's just the antithesis of Jesus. To be Jesus is to say, I'm coming out the box. I'm going to do the opposite of what everyone expects me. I'm going to go to the woman at the well. Not only am I going to have the longest conversation that's ever recorded in the Bible by Jesus is going to happen with this woman at the well. But whilst this woman is at the well, I'm going to say to my disciples, hey, we're in Samaria. Why don't you guys just pop off and get something to eat? I mean, it's so brilliant. Jesus is so explosive. You know, go off and get something to eat. What do you think the disciples were doing at that point? They were like, what do you mean go and get something to eat? How am I going to do that when we're in a foreign land and there's nothing clean because we're obsessed with cleanliness? Oh no, woe is me. What am I going to do? I have no clean food. So, but I love the way that Jesus is just constantly undermining their religiosity, constantly saying, all right, go on then, off you go and get something to eat. It's just brilliant. And in that place where they are befuddled and trying to work out how to do it, he's like busy chatting to a lady who he shouldn't be chatting to. It's great.
I know.
That's my Jesus. That's my Jesus right there.
And you, honestly, I just sit and listen to you. I don't need to ask any questions, but seeing as this is a conversation between these two people, but you have created then a space for those marginalized families to come. You started, you say, in your home, and now hundreds of people. You are an ordained minister. There are lots of people who will be listening who see the need and would like to create something. Maybe they feel that they could create something, and they don't necessarily have to go to theology school and create that, and study to be a minister. How do they start to do that? How did you start? How did you start building and creating that space for the people who you saw on the margins?
Bambi, that is such a good question, because the answer is not a comfortable answer. And I think that's the first thing, is that it begins with discomfort. It begins with, I'm not happy with the way these people are treated in churches that I'm seeing. I'm not saying all churches, hear me on this. There are churches that are great, I'm sure. But I began to just go, these people's needs. There's so many de-churched people. I have so many, even outside of the SEND community. I'm like, why is there so many people that used to be in church and now they're not in church? What's going on? So there are like de-churched and unchurched people. And we began to be curious. So discomfort is the first thing. I'm uncomfortable. And then I'm curious. I'm curious about why is this happening and then what can we do about that? And so for us, it was about creating and curating spaces where people could be curious. People could, again, we're so black and white as Christians. I've learned to sit in the grey, not just embrace it, but set up house there. That's a liminal space. The liminal space is where the magic happens. The liminal space, that in-between space where we've left the security of what we knew. And we know there's something ahead, but we don't quite know what that might be. And that's okay. It's okay to not know. It's okay to sit in church and have doubts. It's okay for those doubts not to be sewn up by the end of a sermon. It's okay to come back week after week still with your doubts. And it's okay to think differently. So when I preach, people interrupt me the whole time. And that becomes, so the sermon is shaped by the people. So therefore, we are intentionally pushing into lowerarchy. I'm not interested in hierarchy. So we are curiously asking, what do we think about that? So when we say Jesus heals, I could give you a great sermon about Jesus healing. And then what if someone has just had their child die? And they prayed and then their child still died. So what does Jesus say then? These are the questions that we bring up without the need to have it all sewn up, because we must give God really good PR, right? Yeah. So our thing is like, we don't need to, God is responsible for God's business, right? So I don't need to be God's PR machine. I can be curious. I can sit in that liminal unknown space. I can question, I can be uncomfortable, I can be unhappy, I can be happy, I can be hopeful, I can be all of those things, but sometimes all at once. And I can allow people to have autonomy. The autonomy, I encourage autonomy in our church. You have autonomy, you have control over your life. You choose, if you want to, on a minute-by-minute basis to surrender that to God. But no church or leader in church is going to be my autonomy. That's not, you need to think for yourself. And that's what I've learned through the trauma of, I would say, just being in church and being traumatized by church.
Everyone should be able to access their church. In this podcast, you've heard how this isn't always easy for some people. Growing Hope's accessibility training helps churches become welcoming places for every child and family. We'll train your whole church community, not just to give your building wider doors and access ramps, but to help you change your culture so that every child and young person is welcome. Book your training today at growinghope.org.uk/churches.
Yeah. And it's a real thing. I would say from personal experience, I'm visually impaired and diagnosed when I was a teen, and the thing was to go to church and be healed and get your healing. And that never happened for me. And
same.
I went for a long time thinking, well, my faith must be broken then. There must be something wrong. And I say this not to kind of, this is not about me, this show, but I'm just trying to help people understand that even if that healing doesn't come in the way that, is normal, or the way that people say it should come through church, when you pray, if your faith is strong enough, you should be healed. It doesn't mean that you are loved any less and you can't be used in any less of a way by God because that healing hasn't come. I feel as though healing and the disability world, it can get sort of confused.
It really can. And, we must remember that everyone that Jesus touched, he healed, but Jesus didn't touch everybody. That's first up. Second up is if you go back to the Old Testament and you look at how the Jews were taken into exile, into Babylon. When they're taken into Babylon, their temple is destroyed. That means they can't do their sacrificing. They're in a foreign land. There's all these other different people that have come into that same bit of Babylon, and it's an absolute melting pot. And they are so terrified of losing everything in that space that they begin to talk and work out, what do we believe? It's a really, really interesting point in history. But the thing that they circle around a lot, and you see it a lot, especially in Isaiah and Jeremiah, you see this narrative, which is, this is all my enemy's fault. My enemy has, I've been smited by my enemy, and that's why we're suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Then the next bit of the cycle round, they go, it was us. We were so badly behaved. We have been smited by God, right? And then they move around a little bit more and they go, God doesn't really like us or love us anymore, and it's God's fault. And they cycle round, but they particularly focus on it's my enemy or it's me. And we do the same. We cycle round. So when I became a Christian at 20 and I had very, very serious Crohn's disease, immediately people said, okay, let's take a look at the generational curses. And they're like, okay, it's because your mother went to a spiritualist meeting once. Let's pray that out of you. So that got prayed out. Then it was, hang on a minute, we just discovered your dad had been a Freemason. That's it. You're going to pray that out of you. And I had the prayer for all of those things. And every time I would go forward, I would fervently pray. I would be fasting. I would be shabba-lapping. I'd be going for it. And then I would be just as ill the next day. And I would just continue in faith. And it went on like this. And then it moved from things that had happened in my family. It went to, so it must be that you've done something in your life that is wrong. So then it became about my past sin and things that I might have done. So then I had all of that prayed out. And then it didn't work again. So the next thing became, it's because you don't have enough faith. Yeah. And so that's, we dilute it down. We distill it down till it comes to, you are just simply not good enough.
Yeah.
And all of this, honestly, right now in 2025, as we're recording this, I believe is absolute tosh. I absolutely do not believe any of it. I don't believe any of that now. But I spent a good 15 to 20 years of my early Christian life believing that rubbish. And it nearly killed me. I think it also absolutely damaged my perception of God and who God is.
Yeah.
And that's not what God is like, honestly, all that silliness.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I call it that. Maybe if I need to say I respect other people. If that's what you believe, that's, what you go on, you do you do you and I'll do me.
Yeah.
But this is me.
But it does a lot of damage. I mean, the both of us, our experiences, I guess we can see that it does a lot of damage. It did a lot of damage to us in those early years. But and I'm just very, very conscious of people still going through that, like you say, 2025.
Right.
People still going through that, and it's just the amazing miracle that is life. Everybody's life in whatever form that takes.
Oh, absolutely right. And I think we have, one of my big bones of contention is I have a number of friends, female friends that are in their 40s and they haven't met a Christian partner and they haven't had children, and they realize that they're just about to hit that point where they won't be able to have children themselves. And so, and there's always someone that says, oh, I waited on the Lord, and when I got to 40, I met my partner, and now I've got my 2 babies and I'm so happy. And you know what? Absolutely, bless you that happened for you, but that is not the blueprint for every woman. We know that because we've all got friends who are in that space that don't have those answers to prayer. And what do we do when people don't get answers to prayer? That stuff is what I'm curious about. Mm-hmm. Surely it's more about, and the more I looked into this whole concept of what it means to have special needs, why is my reality seen as a need? I'm autistic. Why is my very existence seen as a need? It's only a need in the light of the fact that we have made neurotypical the height of what we all want to be.
Yes.
And if we just deconstructed that a little bit and could allow that circle to be a bit broader, to incorporate all neurodiversities, we would see splendid stuff being done.
Thank you for listening to the Growing Hope Conversations podcast. Join us again next week to hear more of Bambi's conversation with Carrie, where they chat about what parenting looks like in the Grant household.
Isn't it ironic that it was a soap opera that saved my child's life, and not a school, or not emergency services, or not CAMS?